Hello and welcome to Against the Law, the myth-busting ancient history podcast where we aim to present the true history facts. But if you hear this noise, that's the sound of our Against the Law gavel smacking down on untruths as we unpack fact from fiction to deliver you the real stories from ancient history. The day we record this podcast is a very special day. Today it's Zenia's birthday, so we all wish her an absolutely fantastic day, and unusually she'll be the one giving us a gift. That is her knowledge about all things ancient Rome. Never looking a Trojan gift horse in the mouth, it's Meg who will be telling us all about ancient Greeks and their birthdays. Our Barney makes learning about the ancient Near East a piece of cake. And I'm Flo. I don't know much about ancient history, but I do have a keen interest in birthday cake, so I'm ready to learn with you today all about ancient birthdays. The cherry on the cake really comes from our new Patreon supporter, Sean. We're really grateful to you, Sean. We know you love drains and sewers, so I hope you enjoyed our last episode. If you'd like to support us as we continue to make more content, you can find us on Patreon. You could snag yourself some fantastic goodies while making sure we can deliver the podcast for future seasons. And now, the birthdays episode. Woohoo! Zenia, have you celebrated with cake today? That's quite a traditional thing to do, is celebrate with a bit of cake for your birthday.
I have. I was very cheeky. I had cake for breakfast.
Ooh, nice. Is that a thing that has happened throughout the centuries in the ancient world? Did people always celebrate with cake for their birthdays?
Well, I found out that the Romans had cake for their birthdays, although it wouldn't always be them who ate it. So there were all sorts of really nice, really nice different recipes that they do. Usually, it's that kind of like you know, like polenta cake. But because they didn't really have self-raising flour or like bicarb, so they couldn't get that raising agent in cakes that we're used to today with our fluffy Victoria sponges. But yeah, the Romans had sort of dense cakes. Sometimes I found this really nice recipe called libum, and that had cheese in it. So it was like cheese, like soft cheese, like feta or Philadelphia type cheese, with flour and honey and eggs, and it could be savoury or it could be sweet. There was a really cool layered cheesecake that they would do where you sort of make a pastry, quite a thick, dense pastry, and then you put a blob of the cheese mixture on top, and then you layer it up like a lasagna, and then you fold these layers of pastry over each other in quite an artistic way. It looks like one of those fancy napkins, the ones that you see folded up at restaurants. So it's that sort of design of cake. But as I say, they wouldn't eat it. They would give it to the gods to eat.
What? So you can't have your cake and eat it too? You've got to just offer it to someone else? It sounds like something my mum would do for her birthday, is cook a cake and go, I'll just do the washing up, you tuck in. Like, oh no. That's quite sad, really. So I guess cake is something that I think of as a sweet thing. So in my head, cake is you've got a fluffy cakey bit and then some frosting or decoration. But I guess is cake something else in the ancient world? It's just like a block of, it's like a loaf of something that could be savoury or sweet.
Yeah, exactly. Because as I say, they didn't have the raising agent, and also they didn't have sugar. So they would be sweetening things either with like dates or date syrup or with honey.
So Meg, Barney, any other ancients celebrating with cake?
Yes, similar situation on the Greek front. Cakes for birthdays, but not unfortunately for your own birthday. It would again be for the birthdays of the gods. So you would dedicate a cake as a sort of votive offering to a particular god on their birthday. But interestingly, the Olympian gods celebrated their birthday every month, most of them. So Apollo's birthday was the 7th of every month. So I think that's a bit unfair. I would quite like to have that, but that meant that they got a lot of cake, and the type of cake they got differed, but according to which god it was, and some of them would be in fun shapes. So I think Apollo and maybe Artemis got cakes in the shape of animals. So like Artemis would get a cake in the shape of a deer, she's associated with hunting. And sometimes these cakes shaped like animals could almost take the place of a sacrifice of an animal. So instead of like killing an ox or a deer or whatever and sacrificing it to God, you just give them a nice cake shaped like an animal, which I think is cute.
So that's a bit like having a corn chicken nugget instead of actually sacrificing a chicken, which I quite like. I quite like that. It's a shame that those are for the gods only, though. But maybe this is just the greedy side of me coming out, that it's an offering and not something that you can eat yourself. Because now I'm thinking about cake and my stomach's rumbling. Barney, how about in your ancient world? Anybody there having cake as a celebration for a birthday?
I hate to interrupt the run of positivity that we've had from Zenia and Meg, but the short answer is no.
Oh,
no cake, no cake over here.
No cake, no
But,
cake for the ancient Near East.
Well, I'm sure they had some tasty, honey and date-based desserts in a similar way to Zenia mentioned, and actually in a similar way that you still see in the Middle East today. But one thing I was going to mention, since we're on God's birthdays, in Egypt, part of the calendar for the year had God's birthdays in as well, but they were actually considered a little unlucky. There was a few of them. Yeah. So there was a few of them named, and they were the 5 days towards the end of the year. They didn't have the precise 365 and a quarter calendar that we have now. They did have 360, so 12 months of 30 days, and those remaining 5 were the gods' birthdays. And so that was before you got to the new year, and so they were like these kind of dangerous transitional days before the sun was born again at the start of the new year. Coincidentally also being one of the sun god's birthdays at the start of the new year. But yeah, so not necessarily always good things, these birthdays.
So they were unlucky days. That's interesting. Did any birthdays get any kind of culinary treats though? Because for my birthday I might not necessarily want cake. I might want an all you can eat at Nando's. Are there any other kind of feasts or exciting meals happening for birthdays in the ancient Near East?
Well, I didn't want to tread on Meg's toes with this, but I found that there's a reference in Herodotus to Persians celebrating their birthdays. So this would be the Achaemenid Persian Empire with your Xerxes and your Dariuses and your Cyruses. They're always having banquets, according to Herodotus, but on their birthdays they have bigger banquets. And I don't know, maybe Meg can fill us in on this, but to me that just makes it sound like Herodotus is making the Persians sound kind of excessive, especially because the Greeks weren't supposed to celebrate their own birthdays, but then the Persians did, so they're kind of putting these two characters at odds here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's a theme that runs throughout. And I find it interesting how that kind of the Greeks see the Persians like that, but then to some extent the Romans see the Greeks like that as kind of excessive consumers. So it goes in this interesting chain. But yes, there's a similar reference. I didn't actually find that Herodotus one, but I found a similar reference in Plato, where a character sort of says that the whole of Asia will celebrate when a king of Persia has their birthday. And it's, this huge feast that goes on forever and ever. And that's quite being represented as very different to what happens in Greece, where there's a few references in literature to people celebrating birthdays, but it doesn't seem like it was a common widespread tradition. It would just be like, oh, it's my daughter's birthday, so I might have a party, but it doesn't seem like it'd be something everyone would do.
So there were feasts on birthdays then. So Zenia, have you got a feast planned tonight?
Yeah, I think we might get a takeaway in. That'll be nice.
Treat yourself.
Apparently it wasn't just the Persians, or at least the Persians according to the Greeks, that were having these birthday feasts. Allegedly, according to the Bible, the Old Testament, Genesis, Pharaoh, the nondescript Pharaoh of the Bible, also celebrated a birthday with a feast. And I think what's interesting about this is that there's no definitive answer to when Genesis in the Old Testament was written, but I think there's a scholarly consensus that it's sort of around the 5th century BC. That is a very similar time to some of the other mentions of birthdays that we might have in the ancient world, not too far off from Herodotus writing about the Persians. So I just found it interesting that there's barely any mentions of pharaohs in the Egyptian tradition celebrating their own birthdays, but then we have this Near Eastern source, the Bible, mentioning a birthday in the same kind of milieu as we see a lot of other birthdays coming up. So I don't know if there's like a tide change coming about with birthdays here, but either way, the Bible says that Pharaoh celebrated his birthday with a feast.
Well then, Zenia, you're going to have a dinner fit for a king, or a pharaoh at least.
Lucky me.
It seems like something that's so ingrained in our culture to celebrate birthdays that it seems really quite weird that wasn't always something that was done in the ancient Near East. So was the actual birthday, the day of birth, ever celebrated?
Funnily enough, Rome's birthday was celebrated, as in the city of Rome.
Oh, could you tell us the story about how Rome was born? Because I've heard something about a wolf and some twins, and I don't know if I know the full story.
We'd like to issue a content warning for the following story, the beginning of which mentions sexual violence in the context of Roman myth. If you'd prefer not to listen to this, you can skip to 1046, where the story continues without any further mention of this.
Okay, settle down. Now, I shall begin. This is the story of Romulus and Remus. So there were these two twin brothers, and they were the children of a priestess who had been she'd unfortunately been raped in the temple, and she got pregnant, and she had to go somewhere to give birth, so she gave birth outside, and she abandoned her children. But fortunately, these two little boys, they were adopted by a she-wolf, is how the mythology goes. So
Like Shakira.
yeah. Shakira found them, and and she sorted them out for their first few years. But then they were adopted by a shepherd. They were really, like, shepherds in the ancient world were very, very hardcore. If you think about it, they were out in the wild a lot, fending off wolves, whatever else was out there that might attack their sheep. So they were usually illiterate and very, very hardcore.
Like a farmer mafia.
Yeah. And then they decided to found a city. This is a very condensed story. And it was the two of them together. They founded the city together. Romulus was very excited about this city, and he decided to like plow a furrow around the edge, and he started building a little wall. But Remus mocked him and thought that his little walls were just too little, and he couldn't resist jumping over them. Now, in some versions of the story, it's Romulus who kills him for jumping over his walls and making fun of his city. In another version of the story told by Ovid, he says Romulus prayed to a god, Keller, and said that, if anyone jumps over my wall, strike them down. And then it was his brother who jumped over the wall, and Keller struck down his brother. Anyway, so this apparently happened on the 21st of April, 753 BC. That was a very, very clear date that the Romans had for the birthday of Rome. And it happens to be at exactly the same time as this sort of shepherd festival called the Perilia. So these two festivals sort of came together. It's like a nod to the shepherd that adopted Romulus and Remus.
It's almost like a Lego building competition, and then one of the twins mocks the other ones, and then he's struck by a bolt of lightning or something quite dramatic. That's quite an intense way to go. So it seems like almost like God's birthdays took precedence over mere mortal birthdays then.
Yeah, sort of. And that even applied. So Romans did actually celebrate their personal birthdays, but they did it in a way that was still like a nod to deities. So the Romans believed that they had, it's quite a hard concept to define. They called it their genius, or genius is how it would be pronounced in Latin, we think. And it was sort of like halfway between a soul and a guardian angel. And it was a thing that they were given on their birth, at their date of birth, on their birthday, and it was this sort of spirit that looked after them through life. But this spirit needed annual refreshing. So on their birthday, they would sacrifice, again, sometimes it would be cake, sometimes it would be animals, sometimes it would be cake instead of animals. They would sacrifice to their genius.
Is it almost like a horoscope where you're matched up with like a god that's related to your birthday, like horoscopes that we have now? And actually, or in fact, another question, are horoscopes older than I think? Because in my head, horoscopes is something quite recent and made up.
I know Barney will be able to give more detail on the origins, but before we do that, Zenia, do you know if, based on what you just said, the date about Rome's origin, what star sign would Rome itself be?
Oh gosh, that's a good point.
Wow, I don't know the star signs off the top of my head, but if that's its birthday, I really want to know what kind of personality Rome is meant to have.
Taurus.
Ooh.
So the 20th. So I'm a Taurus, and then obviously I'm the 25th of April, and I think it's the 20th of April is the cut-off point for the star sign before, so he would have been a Taurus if he's the 21st.
Just about. Okay. And what are the sort of modern associations with a Taurus?
Stubborn, like a bull, because Taurus
Yeah.
is a bull, right? That's about it that I know. It's an earth sign. I don't know if that means anything. I need to check my horoscope.
Flo, do you think that's an accurate representation of both you and the city of Rome?
Yeah, I do identify quite strongly with the city of Rome. We are kindred spirits. We are a soul match.
Well, the last few lines of Ovid's poem about this Perilia, the birthday of Rome, is the city arose, destined, who'd have believed it then, to plant its victorious foot upon all the lands, rule all, and be ever subject to mighty Caesar.
Mm.
So that's
Just like Flo.
It's just like me. It's like looking in a mirror.
Who knew?
Now we're on the subject of horoscopes. It's old then, because part of my brain thinks it's like a ploughman's lunch, which was invented quite recently. We always think a ploughman's lunch in the UK is something that farmers will have had throughout the centuries to refresh themselves with a pork pie, an apple, some slices of cheese and a beer. But actually it was invented in like the 1960s so that pubs could sell food as well as drink. And I've always thought horoscopes is kind of something that you get at the end of a magazine.
Yeah.
But did people regularly do like horoscopes, and did they care about their zodiac signs? Was it called zodiac? Take me on a journey. I want to learn.
I'm disappointed to hear about the ploughman's lunch, actually. But
I'm sorry,
maybe
Barney.
that's all right. It's all right. Perhaps the truth about horoscopes won't be so disappointing. So, yes, they had horoscopes in ancient Babylonia, which is great. So they're very old and related to omens, which our listeners will know come up a lot. Big fan of omens. So interestingly, today horoscopes are thought of as astrological rather than astronomical, right? The difference being that one is to do with the science of space and celestial bodies, and the other one is to do with kind of interpreting the logic of the stars. So that the Babylonian ones were kind of both. And actually, this is one of the few ways that we can see them at least noting people's birthdays in ancient Babylonia, because certain priests were in the business of giving people horoscopes when they were born.
So I've heard that done recently. So that's something that's quite interesting that we actually do now. So I know that when one of my friends had her baby, that someone presented her with a big document of that baby's star reading or horoscope or something. So I've got, it's quite nice that we still do that now.
Yeah, and the document is actually spot on, vis-a-vis the Babylonian sources. And it's worth pointing out that these are very late. Most of them, they are like 5th century BC, which is actually after like all of the native dynasties of Babylon have come to an end, and it's under Persian rule. Anyway, what the documents would say was, at the time of the birth of this child, these planets were in these positions in the sky, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's definitely done now. I've definitely seen that as a gift that can be given. So Meg, what's the sort of influence that's from the ancient Babylonian world on the ancient Greeks?
So they basically just ripped them off. They got a lot of their horoscope information, the Greeks did, from the Babylonians. I think this is kind of 5th, 4th century BC. You start to get a bit of influence onto Greek ideas of horoscopes. Again, they would already have had lots of ideas about the gods and the planets and stuff, but that idea of a horoscope is coming in there from the Babylonians. But then interestingly, it also has quite a lot of overlap with Egyptian astrology because of the Alexandrian conquest. So we've talked about Alexander the Great before and him founding Alexandria in Egypt. So that led to a lot of overlap between Greek and Egyptian culture in the sort of the last 3 centuries before the year 0. So Greek astrology is kind of originally influenced by the Babylonians, but then also influenced by Egyptian astrology. So it's this real mishmash, really kind of multicultural influences on it. But then becomes this massive Greek thing. And etymology hour, the word horoscope comes from Greek, of course. Hora is hour, like our word hour, and skopos is a watcher, so it just means watching the hours. And zodiac also comes from Greek, and it comes from a word that just means a little animal. A zodiakos, I think, is a circle of little animals, which obviously makes sense given what a zodiac is.
That's quite cute.
Oh, I think it's cute, and that's also where we get the word zoo. Ultimately, it's the same root word meaning animal. So there we go.
Oh, that's quite interesting then. So it's definitely more of a sort of a beefed up thing in the ancient Near East and with the ancient Greeks then, because I always think of horoscopes as being like a weekly thing that you get in the back of a magazine that will say something like, you're going to meet a tall dark stranger on Thursday. Now's a good time to invest your money. Don't start any projects on Friday, and that they're updated every week. So would there be someone to update your horoscope every week in the ancient world?
Not exactly in the Babylonian perspective, and maybe this is where they're slightly different to the modern idea, is that these were kind of based on a type of omen or related to a type of omen called a nativity omen, so done when an individual was born. So this is like literal, it's not a birthday celebration per se, but it is something done on your first birthday. And it was just important to know where the planets were and where the sun and the moon were at the time that you were born, because that connection was going to carry through the rest of your life with you. What's really frustrating, though, is that you don't get... There's not very many of these horoscopes, by the way. I found a paper that said there were 28 that had been identified. They don't ever make any predictions, so you don't get that tall, dark stranger stuff. You just get, on your birthday, Venus was here and the moon was there. And that's about it.
Yeah, it's very similar in Greece, actually, that it's a science of births and birthdays, really. It's not being constantly updated. But because of that, because it was all about, if this is what's happening, if this is the state of the planets and the stars on the day you're born, your life will be good or bad. And I think the Greeks maybe did have a bit more kind of predictions about what would actually happen. Like omens at birth would mean certain things later in life. But that also meant that they could do it for like Zenia was saying, you could do it for cities. So they would be like, oh, well, if the city was founded on this day, that was Mercury was doing something weird, and well, wouldn't Mercury for the ancient Greeks, but we say Mercury's in retrograde now, they might be like, oh, something weird is happening then, so that means it'll go badly. Or events, so they would be like, oh, if we're going to start a war, we better do it on a day which will be good in terms of that day's horoscope. So they would kind of delay doing things to make sure that the event would have a good horoscope, which I thought was interesting.
Meg mentioned that these were the Greek horoscopes were going on in around the 5th century BC, and this was the same thing in Babylonia. And in fact, although amongst these tablets there are very few names, 2 of them do have personal names, and they're both Greek.
Wow, a crossover.
Yeah, big crossover moment. So these are Greek names that have been spelled out phonetically in cuneiform, and one of them is Aristocrates. Very nice sounding Greek name. It had been rendered with 9 different signs in cuneiform. A, ri, is, tu, ug, gi, ra, ti, e. Aristocraty.
I like that.
That's amazing. So that was on a horoscope, you're saying?
That's right. Yeah. There were 2 named horoscopes from like the sort of Hellenic Babylonia, Greekified Babylonia, much later on.
I really like that, because it's almost like you can hear a voice from the past when you sound it out phonetically like that. It's like, how we anglicize certain names where we're not using the pronunciation that they started out with. So it's like you're hearing a voice from the past pronouncing a name that they're not used to. That's really cool.
Aristocrates, presumably like the aristocracy. Presumably that's where we get that. I think it means aristo is best, isn't it? And krater is like rule, I think. So that like the aristocracy, that would be the best rule. So that's interesting that not only is there a crossover between Babylonian and Greek there, but then also an English etymology. Amazing.
Bonus. And actually quite pertinent, because unfortunately, as with many sources from the ancient world, the people getting these omens would probably have been fairly elite. So this Aristocrates there was probably a pretty well-off Greek in Babylon.
That is interesting, and I think possibly a difference between the Near East and Greece when it comes to horoscopes is that I read that the like classic Greece, they really democratized astrology and said that anyone could study or practice the study of horoscopes, of astrology. And the way that was being phrased in this thing I was reading was as if that was a difference from the the culture that Greece inherited it from, which was obviously the Babylonians.
So I might have to prepare you, Zenia, for your birthday, a kind of backdated horoscope, nativity horoscope for your day of birth. Maybe
Yeah,
we can work out where the stars were.
Where Venus was when I was born. Crucial
That would be cool. So in terms of ancient birthdays then, so there's a really sort of heavy focus on the gods, and the selfish person in me is like, what about me on my birthday? Would I have been able to have a birthday party? Could I have had people round?
We have one really, really cute ancient artefact, and it's from our favourite place, Vindolanda, up on Hadrian's Wall. I think we might have mentioned it once before. It's a birthday party invitation.
Oh, that's cute.
This is what we've got. We've got a birthday party invitation from one woman in one camp, in one fort along Hadrian's Wall, to another woman in Vindolanda. And she gives the date of her birthday party, and she says that she would love to see her there. So I think that's very cute. That's exactly the kind of WhatsApp messages I've been sending to my friends for my birthday party.
That's really sweet. I've just looked it up and it says, on the 11th of September, sister, for the day of the celebration of my birthday, I give you a warm invitation to make sure that you come to us to make the day more enjoyable for me. I shall expect you, sister. Farewell, sister, my dearest soul, as I hope to prosper and hail. It's quite sweet. That's really sweet.
There's a lot going on there. That's quite gushing. Behind the scenes, I wonder if she's like, oh, that other woman who I really hate and I just had an argument with is also going to be there. I need you to be there to back me up.
There's some drama there. There's some real housewives of the Vicus of Vindolanda.
Oh my gosh, that should be a programme. Can we make that?
Yes, please.
There's another lovely gushing poem by Marshall, who's Caroline Lawrence's favourite. And he writes a little poem to his friend Quintus. He says, I love your April birthday as much as I love my own in March, and so I should. The one gave me life, but the other gave me a friend.
Oh, I'm stealing that one. Can't use it on you because you've already heard it now, but I'm definitely stealing that one.
I think that also really shows again the even though for the Romans clearly there were birthday parties, but even though in a lot of the ancient world there weren't, there really is that again that importance attached to the idea of the day when you're born, the day you're kind of given to the world as a friend. That's so sweet. I love that.
That's lovely. And did they get loads of birthday prezzies? Is that a thing that happens?
It might be the case that Athena, who's very important goddess, Greek goddess, she might have been given a dress on her birthday, but only once every 4 years. So do you guys remember the peplos that we spoke about in our clothes episode, which is a sort of fancy dress that would have been worn by women in Greece?
Yeah.
In the Pan Athenaia, which is one of the most important festivals for Athens, it was celebrated on Athena's birthday, and the greater Pan Athenaia, so like the biggest one, was celebrated every 4 years. And it culminated on the 28th day of the month, and that is the presentation of the sacred peplos to Athena. And some sources say that that's her birthday, so she gets given this lovely peplos every 4 years for her birthday, along with all the cake.
Do you reckon that as she's given it, they're like, I've kept the receipt in there in case you don't like it? You can swap it for a nice shawl. Well, Meg, you said earlier that you quite like to have a birthday every month, but actually in the ancient world, it sounds like quite a bit of a hassle. You've got to make a cake for other people to have. You only get a gift once every 4 years. I know I'm merging the ancient worlds here, but it just seems a bit like it's my birthday again.
I guess what I'm saying is that I would like to be a goddess in the ancient world and have a birthday every month, which is maybe a bit unachievable.
It's nice to have reasonable standards, Meg, I always think. But being a goddess would be a piece of cake.
So, if we've discussed humans having birthdays and gods and goddesses having birthdays, Can you think of another kind of entity popular in the ancient Near East that also had to be born?
Animals.
Ooh, not animals.
Demons.
Yes, Flo's got it. The demons are back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dirty hands or whatever.
Dirty hands. Yeah, I feel like there's always going to be some like demon connection. I feel like as we maybe I don't ever want to phase out the Babylonian bell, but I feel like the demon dong.
We don't want any demon dong. Okay,
So-
this is a safe for work podcast. All right, no demon dongs here, Barney.
But the point I'm trying to make is these demons do crop up quite a lot, and one of the few rare, if any, true references to something having a birthday proper in the ancient Near East is from a letter that the Neo-Assyrian king Esarhaddon wrote to the god Ashur. Ashur being the chief god of Assyria, hence the name. And he's explaining how he conquered a bunch of cities, which was a very Assyrian thing to do. And he conquered a city up in Turkey on the birthday of this particular demon called Asaku, which was supposed to be a very unlucky day, but he conquered it anyway.
It's quite cool. I quite like that the demons get acknowledged for their birthdays as well.
There's some unlucky days in Greece as well. Hesiod, who's a really early Greek writer, like sort of 7th century BC, roughly contemporary with Homer. He says that the 5th of the month. So again, we're getting this like a birthday is the day of the month rather than the day of the year. And the 5th of every month is a bad day because that was when Hawkus was born, who's quite an obscure. He's not even really a god. A personification of oaths is Hawkus, but his mother was Eris, who's the goddess of discord and strife. So the day he was born was a very bad day, and then all of the 5th of the month was bad. So if you ever have a bad day and you look at your calendar and it's the 5th, you can be like, it's just because Hawkus was born today several thousand years ago.
It's quite harsh, really, isn't it? Like, they've ruined it for everyone.
Yeah, selfish.
Really selfish. So it actually sounds like birthdays weren't as sort of like fun as they are now. You've got to make sure that you're not, being born on a day that's cursed or shared with a demon, or that you've got a bad omen or whatever. It seems like a real hassle.
Yeah.
Being born generally.
Just being born generally. I didn't ask to be born, especially not on a day that's cursed. Zenia, I hope your birthday has been miles more delightful than perhaps it would have been if we'd have been born in ancient history.
I think so. Well, I got to eat my own cake. That's a good start.
That's true. That is true. So what was everyone's favourite fact that they've learned today? Let's start with the birthday girl, Zenia.
Thanks. Well, actually, my favourite fact was a bit random, but it really, really tickled me. The idea of this Assyrian king conquering a town on an ill-omened day, but just doing it anyway. I think like the boldness of that is something I really admire. I think that was very cool, Barney.
It was quite cool. Barney, what's your favourite fact from today?
I was really amazed, especially considering what little references there are to birthdays in the ancient Near East, just how much birthday information there is from ancient Rome. And I really like the idea of people writing poems. I've enjoyed a birthday limerick in the past, so I like to see there being a little bit of continuity between then and now.
I do love a birthday limerick. They are good fun. Meg, how about you? What was your favourite thing to learn today?
Well, I love the Vindolanda birthday invitation. That's an absolute classic. But I also really enjoyed Barney's fact about the Greek named Babylonian horoscopes. So Aristocrates and the other guy. I thought that was a really interesting sort of vision into these cross-cultural events with specific reference to the birthdays. I thought that was great.
Meg, I must have been born on a cursed day because those were my 2 favourite facts. Right, listeners, thank you for coming along to Zenia's birthday party. You can pick up a party bag on your way out. But before we leave, we're going to wish Zenia a happy birthday in our areas of expertise. So I don't have one, so I'm just going to say happy birthday, Zenia.
There's no Akkadian happy birthday recorded, obviously, but if you wanted to say to have a good or a lucky day of birth, you would say iliti damku.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And if anybody was wondering where I recognize from as the word for day, you could see it in Yom Kippur in Hebrew, Yom being the Hebrew word for day.
So again, Greek, not a set phrase, but very much inspired by modern Greek. I'm going to say kala genethlia.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
Me too.
That's really sort of romantic.
Mm.
And the Latin is Felicis Natalis.
Happy birthday, Zenia. We hope you have a lovely feast tonight.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Against the Law. If you can't get enough and are keen for extra content, don't forget to follow us on Twitter @AgainstLaw, and we're on TikTok too. And if you enjoyed this episode, please support us on Patreon. We have different support tiers depending on how much you can spare each month, and each one comes with a special reward to say thank you. We love to hear from you, so please reach out to us with questions or comments on Twitter or email againstthelawpodcast@gmail.com. Bye!